I just want to make the point again, if you're a Democrat on this dais and you voted to fund the Department of Homeland Security, please raise your hand. That's what I thought. And so, it's just too hard to sit here and listen. And they're hoping that nobody calls them out on their gaslighting. They're hoping that nobody does and that we all just play nice in here. I'm not going to do it. That's not why my constituents sent me to Washington, D.C.
A congressman just asked every Democrat on a Homeland Security Committee to raise their hand if they voted to fund the Department of Homeland Security. Not one hand went up, not a single one. And then those same members kept right on talking about how communities are not getting funded. Stay with me until the end, because what happened next in that hearing room is something you need to see for yourself. Like and subscribe right now, because this one is worth sharing.
The Trump administration continues to withhold over $1.2 billion in FEMA counterterrorism funding that should have been provided to communities almost 6 months ago for programs such as Urban Area Security Initiative and Nonprofit Security Grant Program. The Trump administration is even challenging court orders that would make this funding available immediately to first responders, nonprofits, and other local partners. In many communities, this lack of funding is jeopardizing security preparations for upcoming large events, such as the FIFA World Cup, America 250 celebrations, and 2028 Olympic Games. And if, for whatever reason, those funds are not made available, then those communities become susceptible to potentially any kind of danger. So I look forward to trying to unblock the logjam and get the monies to the communities where they need it. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Crane, for 5 minutes of question.
It's just unbelievable to me that we sit here in this hearing today, which is about security and intelligence sharing for these large events coming up in the United States of America, like the FIFA World Cup, the Olympics, etc. And my Democrat colleagues continue to blast the Trump administration for not funding the Department of Homeland Security and all of our efforts that are designed to keep these people, our citizens, foreign travelers, and these events safe from attack. And yet not one single one of them voted for the Department of Homeland Security appropriations bill. People ask me all the time, is Washington, D.C. as bad as we think it is? This committee hearing right here is a perfect example of how bad it really is. They'll sit here and talk about the Trump administration and how they're not distributing funds for these events and to keep our communities safe. And yet not one of them voted for the Department of Homeland Security appropriations. That covers the Coast Guard, it covers CISA, cybersecurity, it covers ICE, Department of Homeland Security, all of it. And they didn't vote for any of it. When you hear all these comments from people that voted against funding the Department of Homeland Security, is there a part of you that's like, really? This is political theater. That's what it really is.
Without them being fully open and operational, it causes problems for us in fighting the threats, from transnational organized crime to human trafficking to counterterrorism. They need the resources as much as possible to get, and that includes DHS Office of Intelligence Analysis. Without their backbone supporting us, that's a problem.
How about TSA, right?
Huge.
The folks that, work in airports every day to make sure that folks coming into these events are going to be able to get here and attend these events. Is that open right now? Is that funded?
That's a problem, and especially the support that we get from the Federal Air Marshal Services on counter-drone activities and detection. I mean, they are great partners in this. So there's a lot of components with the DHS that the longer that they don't have funding, the longer we have huge gaps that we will see.
I want to read some quotes that I heard just in this hearing today from some of our Democrat members. This admin has jeopardized Homeland Security efforts. The time for action is short. Release these funds now. Everyone deserves to be safe and free at these events. Security planning cannot take place during insecurity. We're Americans. Funding should be given regardless of politics. Did you guys hear those? I just want to make the point again. If you're a Democrat on this dais and you voted to fund the Department of Homeland Security, please raise your hand. That's what I thought. And so, it's just too hard to sit here and listen. And they're hoping that nobody calls them out on their gaslighting. They're hoping that nobody does and that we all just play nice in here. I'm not going to do it. That's not why my constituents sent me to Washington, D.C. Chief Mabin, if you guys don't get the funding that you need, how's it going to impact Americans that not just in their regular lives, but if they're trying to go to the FIFA World Cup?
Specifically with FIFA, our security plans rely on mutual aid partners, and they need assurances that they will be refunded or be able to seek overtime and travel funds, and so that would negatively impact our security posture.
What you just watched in that hearing room was not a debate. It was a contradiction playing out in real time, and Eli Crane was the only one willing to say it out loud. Benny Thompson stood up and made his case. Over $1 billion in FEMA counterterrorism funding is being withheld. Communities are not getting what they need. The FIFA World Cup is coming. The 2028 Olympics are coming. America 250 is coming. Large public events require serious security infrastructure, and if the money does not flow, people could be put at risk. That is a legitimate concern. No honest person dismisses public safety at events that will bring hundreds of thousands of visitors into American cities. But here is where the argument collapsed under its own weight. Eli Crane did not raise his voice. He did not grandstand. He simply asked a question that the entire room already knew the answer to. He read back the exact quotes from Democrat members during that same hearing. This administration has jeopardized Homeland Security efforts. Release these funds now. Funding should be given regardless of politics. Good lines. Principled sounding lines. And then he asked anyone on that committee who voted for the Department of Homeland Security Appropriations bill to raise their hand. Silence. Not one Democrat raised their hand. Not one. The same members calling for funding had voted against the bill that would have provided it. That is not a policy dispute. That is a structural contradiction, and it was documented live on camera in a congressional hearing. Now it is worth understanding exactly what that appropriations bill covered, because the scope of it matters. The DHS funding bill included the Coast Guard. It included CISA, which handles the country's cybersecurity infrastructure. It included ICE and the broader Department of Homeland Security apparatus. It covered TSA, the agency responsible for screening every single person who walks through an airport on the way to one of these major events. It covered the Federal Air Marshal Service and counter-drone operations, which the law enforcement witnesses in that room specifically named as critical components of event security. When one of the witnesses was asked directly whether TSA being underfunded creates a problem, the answer was immediate. It is a problem, a significant one. And when asked about the broader DHS funding gap and what it means for security at events like the World Cup, the answer was equally direct. Mutual aid partners cannot be brought in without assurances they will be reimbursed. Security posture suffers. Gaps emerge. And gaps in security at an international event hosting millions of people are not abstract risks. They are real ones. So the argument being made on the Democratic side of that room requires you to hold two contradictory positions at the same time. Position 1, these communities desperately need security funding and the administration is wrong to withhold it. Position 2, we will not vote for the appropriations bill that funds the agencies responsible for providing that security. That is not a principled stand, that is a leverage play. And Eli Crane called it exactly what it was. Political theater. There is a deeper issue here that deserves honest examination, and it goes beyond this one hearing. The behavior on display reflects something that has been building in the legislative process for a long time. When one side refuses to participate in the appropriations process, then objects to the consequences of that refusal, the credibility of the objection evaporates. You cannot decline to build the structure and then complain that there is no roof. The witnesses in that room, law enforcement professionals, event security planners, people who actually have to execute safety operations on the ground, were not making partisan arguments. They were explaining operational realities. They need TSA funded. They need DHS funded. They need federal air marshals available for counter-drone support. They They need mutual aid agreements backed by financial assurances. These are not Republican priorities or Democrat priorities. These are the structural requirements of keeping people safe at large-scale events on American soil. When Congress turns those requirements into a political football, the people who pay the price are not the members sitting in that hearing room. They are the Americans attending those events. Crane's point about the raise your hand moment is the one that should stay with you. Because it was not a rhetorical trick. It was a factual test. Did you or did you not vote for this funding? The answer was no from every Democrat on that panel. And yet the criticism of the administration for not releasing funds continued without a single acknowledgement of that vote. That kind of behavior does not go unnoticed forever. Constituents are watching these hearings more than they used to. Information travels faster than it ever has, and when you are caught on camera contradicting yourself with your own voting record, the explanation you give afterward matters a great deal. So far, no explanation has been offered. The bigger structural question, the one that does not have an easy answer, is what happens when a legislative body reaches a point where one side has decided that no bill brought by the other side is worth voting for, regardless of its contents, not because of policy disagreements on the specifics, but because of pure positional opposition. When that becomes the operating mode of a legislative chamber, the chamber stops functioning as a deliberative body. It becomes a performance venue. Eli Crane recognized that. His frustration in that hearing was not manufactured. It was the frustration of someone who showed up to do a specific job, fund the agencies responsible for protecting Americans at major events, and found that the opposition would rather score points than sign the bill. That is the story of this hearing, and it is a story that will matter a great deal as the World Cup, the Olympics, and the America 250 celebrations draw closer and the security planning windows start to close.